You're listening to the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the place where you, as a dad, will gain more tools for your fathering toolbox, and where moms and daughters are also invited to listen into the conversation. Now, here is your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.
Hello and welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, and I'm so thankful that you're joining me here again today, especially if you're a dad who is invested in proactively reaching the heart of your daughter. And I know that the things you learn here on the Dad Whisperer podcast also apply to all of your relationships, whether that's being a dad to sons, whether that's being married to a wife who also is a daughter, or you're dating someone who's a daughter, you are in relationships at work with women who are daughters. I mean, the reality is that I'm all about helping you, coaching you as a man, as a dad, so that you can dial in more effectively to the hearts of the women around you, especially. And because I'm the oldest of four girls, I've been in, I've been a Venusian. I've been on my planet of Venus for all of my life. And my goodness, you guys, this year I'll be 65 years old. Whoa, how did that happen? I mean, this whole thing about Medicare and all the things, I'm like, how could I honestly be that old? But what that means, yes, I do not care if you know my age, but I say, don't ask me my weight. That's a whole other thing. But the reality is what this means is I've lived a lot of years, not only as a woman, but coaching women, counseling women, mentoring women. And I want to help you as a dad understand more about what's going on in our hearts and our heads as women. Not that I speak for all women, but I think I have enough years under my belt to say I have a pretty good idea of what a lot of women are needing and wanting from their fathers. And if you as a dad say, I don't really know where to go to ask for directions, I'm coming to you. I'm bringing you practical action steps. I don't just want to give you topics or theories. I want you always to have something you can do to put into action this week, the love that you have for your daughter, so that you can be not only connected to her heart, but really helping her reach her goals. And you have so much to do with that, Dad. I've just got to tell you that. So here, as we begin another year, another time together, I want to just remind you that I love you to have a visual in your mind of running alongside other dads. Picture yourself on a track running around the course, and I'm on the sidelines as your coach, and I'm cheering you on. I'm standing there saying, Dad, on your mark, get set, go. On your mark, every week, that's the topic or the theme. Get set, filling that in with stories and stats. Go is always your practical action step so you can put your love for your daughters, for your sons, for the women in your life into action this week. On your mark today, I'm calling this How the Anxious Generation is Influencing Your Daughter and What You as Her Dad Can Do About It. Now for Get Set, I want you to know that today I'm highlighting one of the best books that I've read in the last year. It's a 2024 release. It's already a #1 New York Times bestseller hit. This book is written by a psychologist and a researcher, Dr. Jonathan Haidt. The title is, let me spell his last name just in case that's a little tricky spelling. Haidt, Dr. Jonathan Haidt. The title is The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. Now, I know that was a mouthful. Let me say it again. The Anxious Generation, subtitle, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. So interesting that this book came out. Clearly it was being written and researched during the pandemic as he's talking about an epidemic. Okay, so before we dive into this topic of anxiety, because I want to specifically make this tie to you as a girl dad, and I want to ask you a couple of questions here on the onset of this conversation today. Question number 1 of 2. Question number 1. Okay, so if I offered you as a dad a guaranteed success, I would tell you, you will succeed if you do one thing, this one thing, to increase your daughter's self-esteem and at the same time, like 2 for the price of 1, you will be guaranteed a decrease in her anxiety and her depression. Would you beg me to tell you about it? Of course you would. Okay, number 2 question. Because this is kind of a twofold, 2 sides of the same coin kind of question. Would you have ever imagined that as your daughter matured, as she was becoming, more, you would think, mature, more confident perhaps in what she's good at or not good at, skilled in certain ways, that some of the things you may have seen her wired to do at age 5, maybe with art or sports or communication or, social skills, whatever, that now at 15, let's say 5 to 15, wouldn't you assume that by this age, she would be more confident, more secure, more solid in those skills? Of course you would. You would think, okay, by this point in her life, with more practice, more encouragement, and maybe even as parents going, hey, we're always in her corner cheering her on. We're always in the stands applauding her, watching her, celebrating her. But then you watch something happen to your adolescent daughter especially that sometimes sticks into early adulthood and beyond, that you see her maybe begin to fade, her anxiety and depression increase, her self-confidence and self-esteem decrease, and you as a dad are saying, I don't know what to do about this. So I want to highlight what this researcher, this incredible, I would say girl dad himself, I want you to know that right up front. He has a teenage daughter right now. So he's not just writing this book as an expert and a researcher and a psychologist, but he's coming to this topic of asking the question, what has happened to our children where on this side of the pandemic especially, they're not thriving, and we see statistics on the rise of epidemic proportions of mental illness. Now, he's describing mental illness more as self-harm, more anxiety, more depression. But aren't we all asking that? Is what has happened to children, young children, middle-aged children, young adult children, if you still want to call them children. But really, isn't that the question? Is what's happened to all of us on this side of the pandemic? So the things that Dr. Haidt really reports on and highlights in his book are astounding, life-changing. And that's why I want to bring you this topic today, Dad, so that you can be a difference maker in the life of your daughter, so that we don't keep talking about the problem here, but we're talking about what do we do about it and how do you as a dad really move the needle forward in seeing your daughter, I would say, move into more confidence and secure attachment and resilience in all of her life. Let me also say that what's really interesting here is if you wanted to sum up everything that this doctor is saying that he's found in his research, is that primarily the reason that there has been an epidemic rise in mental illness is because we've exchanged a play-based childhood for a phone-based childhood. Now, how he defines the term phone-based, because you might say, what does that mean? You just have your phone in your hand? He is broadly using that term to include all internet-connected personal electronics. So anything that fills time. So it could be a laptop, it could be your tablet, video game consoles, smartphones with millions of apps. So he's saying phone-based is any device, any screen. Isn't that a profound way to say it? I promise you, I hadn't thought of it this way until I reviewed this book, that we have exchanged a play-based childhood for a phone-based childhood, which leads him to ask himself, ask us, ask parents, what is happening in your child's life that is keeping them from playing more, playing at all, playing often? And I mean, would you have ever thought that your daughter, maybe your son, would forget how to play? I mean, there's the thing, when they were 3, 4, 5, all they wanted to do is play. In fact, just last night, I was with my 4-year-old granddaughter. She comes in the kitchen, grabs my hand and says, they call me Mishy. Mishy, will you come play with me? So we went in and did a matching game with cards, turning them over. And she's so good at it. And her whole face lights up because I came in to play with her. She didn't have to be taught how to play. It's intuitively wired in her, isn't it? So what's happening then when kids mature where they're not playing anymore and they're substituting, quote unquote, playing video games, playing with apps, playing on their phone, or I'm even going to add, watching on the screen other people play. Again, sitting with lots of grandkids. We have 18 of them now. They're all different ages from age 1 to 18, literally. They're every year and a couple of them double up. I've sat with many of them where a whole group, like let's say 6 of them are sitting around watching Mr. Beast or watching, oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember the name of the other one, Mariah Elizabeth, I think, where she does these squishy toys that she makes into other forms. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching these. I mean, obviously anything in moderation can be healthy. You know, I love sugar, had some today, had some dark chocolate. But obviously if I eat the whole box, I'm going to get sick. And so this isn't me trying to tell you to be rigid and not allow any phone time or screen time. But we have seen it out of control in the proportions of how much our kids are on screens. And what's happening is they are not playing enough and they are watching other people play, or they are thinking about play, or they're sitting as they play, which is actually an oxymoron. I mean, you could sit and you can play, but how do you do them together? I suppose you can, but we have got to get our kids active again, out in the world again, so that they can remember how to play. So Haidt says that this is having a disastrous impact on our kids. Listen to one of his quotes. He says, it doesn't have to be that way. We can regain control of our own minds. And he's saying that his book is for anyone who wants to understand how the most rapid rewiring of human relationships and consciousness in human history has made it harder for all of us to think, focus, and forget ourselves enough to care about others and build closer relationships. Okay, you may already know this, but I think having someone like, Dr. Jonathan, who is at the helm of research, he's respected, he's in academics. We know that this is a guy who walks his talk and who knows what he's talking about. So when he's saying these things, they carry some weight. Here's what he says to you as a girl dad, that social media use for girls doesn't just correlate with mental illness, and he's mostly talking about anxiety and depression, but he says social media use for girls actually causes mental illness. I mean, that is groundbreaking information. Let me say that again, because it's so important. Social media use for girls. In his book, he talks about the impact to boys in different areas of technology. But for girls, I'm highlighting that here today for you. Social media use for girls doesn't just correlate with mental illness, it causes mental illness. Here's what he goes on to say. Within empirical evidence, meaning this is studied, it's proven, it's reliable and valid research, confirms why girls are more vulnerable than boys when it comes to the influence of social media. 4 things. 1, girls are more affected by visual social comparison and perfectionism. I'll be honest with y'all, it affects me. So I think, I have some of you dads write me and say, hey, do you have anything for older daughters? Dads, you've got to understand, it's the same wherever we're at on the age continuum. Of course, your daughters are more vulnerable in pre-adolescence and adolescence, even into early adulthood, where their brain is not fully formed in the frontal lobe, where they make good decisions and have good judgment and sound reasoning until age 25. So I would say really from probably now about 7, 8 to 25 is the vulnerable areas where a lot of her core competence, her core personality and skill-based wiring is being formed. And so this is really powerful for you to know that as she is visually seeing what others look like and are validating and talking like, she will move her own wiring to the side to take on a persona of that which she views as perfect, as more applauded and lauded, as more popular, as getting more guys' attention or whatever, or girls' attention, whatever. I mean, we all know that Mean Girls is a movie, and wherever your daughter's at on the continuum of her own sexuality and her wiring, and she is going to compare herself a lot more to girls, but she's going to compare herself also in the areas of who's getting the most likes by both genders. So girls are more affected by visual social comparison and perfectionism. Number 2, girls' aggression is more relational. Probably not surprising to you to hear that. For guys, it's more physical. Aggression for girls is more relational. So here's how Dr. Jonathan says it. The way to really hurt another girl is to hit her in her relationships where, and this is his quote, indirect aggression includes damaging other people's relationships or their reputations. I'm going to give you some more examples here in a few minutes, but I first want to just highlight these 4 things. Number 3, girls more easily share emotions and even their disorders. So it could be eating disorders, anxiety disorders, tend to be more forthright with that. Number 4, girls are more subject to predators and harassment. So let me review those because I know you're listening, and so that might be a lot to take in. Girls are more affected by visual social comparison and perfectionism. Girls' aggression is more relational. Girls more easily share emotions and disorders, and girls are more subject to predators and harassment. So on social media, they're going to believe what they hear and who people present themselves to be without always the same levels of discretion, probably that boys have. At least that's what he's found in his research. So dads, the reason this is so important for you to know is because your daughter is being devoured by the impact of social media, whether she admits it or not, whether she knows it or not. So like I was just saying, especially in pre-adolescence and adolescence, where she's beginning to be formed in her own identity by her peers, by the world around her, sometimes more than home, she is susceptible to those negative voices that lead her or can lead her to disconnect from her own self-worth, her own identity, her own person. And that is where she begins comparing herself to others more often, is easily overpowered by those voices. And I would say oftentimes that's where a distortion begins to lock and load. In fact, a lot of my clients through the years are preteens, early teens, where they're really doubting who they were even a year ago or 2 years ago or what they were good at, because now any sense that someone is better than them or more competent than them has them say, I'm going to quit. I'm not good at that anymore. And that's where that perfectionism comes in that Dr. Jonathan talks about. So all of this stuff, I know it breaks your heart as a dad because you see that it leads her away from being her authentic self. Well, what we're going to do now is take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you about 4 foundational areas where Dr. Jonathan has seen this anxious generation be devoured so that you can be aware of these things as a dad and step in to make a powerful and profound difference in your daughter's life. We'll be right back.
Are you a dad who has ever desired a deeper connection with your daughter, but haven't known how to go about it? Let's Talk Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters is the very resource you need. Dr. Michelle wrote it with you dads in mind. This book will support you with scripted questions, equip you to decode your daughter, and inspire you with stories of other dads and daughters. Don't wait any longer to be the hero you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be. So, to let the talking begin, head on over to drmichellewatson.com/books and order your copy today. This book will become a favorite in your fathering toolbox and will give you the answers you've been looking for. That's drmichellewatson.com/books. Now, back to the Dad Whisperer podcast.
Welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, and today we're talking about how the anxious generation is influencing your daughter and what you as her dad can do about it. So we've just highlighted some of the things that Dr. Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book, The Anxious Generation. Now I want to discuss 4 foundational areas of harm, according to Dr. Jonathan, that the anxious generation, also known as Gen Z, born after 95. We can also say Gen Alpha, and there's all these different names, but really he's highlighting anyone born after 95 being impacted in these negative ways due to having a phone-based childhood. Number one, sleep deprivation. So Dad, this is a big deal. It's a real deal. And I would say, honestly, in many ways, well, I guess I need to qualify this because I was going to say this is one of the most important that you've got to hone in on. But I think it does go hand in hand with you got to get that phone out of her hand, get the devices and the access to them out of her control. So those controls aren't in her hands and in her decision making, but you are making those decisions for her. So here's the thing about sleep deprivation. It's due to screen time. So excessive use of smartphones. Don't we all know that? That once we get looking at something, the next thing we know, 15 minutes can go by. Well, how much more your daughter, in her formation of her brain, it's still being formed, is going to lose even more track of time as she gets brought in, your daughter, into relationships especially, and what's going on that way on TikTok or Snap or whatever it is, Instagram, where it's all the stories. And what I want to add here is that this idea of sleep deprivation is excessive use of smartphones. Where that happens the most is before bedtime, during the wee hours of the night. In fact, I recently had a conversation with a 15-year-old girl that was telling me about a texting conversation she was having at 3 a.m. with another friend. And it's because she saw something on social media. And she said, I wasn't supposed to be able to get into that. It wasn't even a chat room or anything like that. I think that's old school. But she wasn't even supposed to have access to this domain, to this special, like where you can just decide who gets to see that post. But she knew a backdoor way in, found out she wasn't invited to an event, and it devastated her. So then she's texting people at 3 a.m. Now, doesn't that bring up the question, where's mom and dad? Where are they in setting limits? Because this whole before bedtime or during the night is where your daughter is especially vulnerable. And if she's not getting enough sleep, it's also going to impact her depression levels, her anxiety levels, her reactivity levels, because she's not getting sleep. I mean, I know we've all read research on what's a good amount of time, right? That your kids should be sleeping. Well, most experts would say that a teenager needs between 8 and 10 hours of sleep every night. Yet most adolescents are getting about 6.5 to 7.5 hours every night, especially during school. If you have a conscientious daughter who wants to get good grades, right, she's probably not sleeping that much during the week. Question is, are they catching up on the weekends? Are you letting her sleep in on the weekends? Or is it get up, we have chores to do? Let your daughter catch up. I've also read some things that say, and again, I know there's differing views on this, that you can quote unquote catch up. So if your daughter needs more sleep on the weekend because she's pushed hard and she's academically driven or driven with sports or juggling all of that, just be mindful. Sleep deprivation is something that will help your daughter make more proactive choices as well. And this Dr. Haidt talks about like high achieving high school students who spiral with anxiety, so that oftentimes they admit to him that it's because they're obsessing over refreshing Instagram, that they want to keep seeing what their friends are doing and how do they measure up. So be mindful of that. Knowing how many followers your daughter has. Does she have goals to get that following higher? What is she doing to make that happen? Because oftentimes that can hook your daughter and that becomes her goal more than real life relationships. So remember, her wiring is relational. So this whole way of wiring makes her more susceptible, and it's understandable that she would then get hooked and sucked in to losing herself on a screen and in that world. So number 2, again, 4 foundational areas of harm that Dr. Haidt says the anxious generation deals with because of a phone-based childhood. Number 2, social deprivation. So we know the pandemic heightened all these realities, didn't it, for your kids? He tells the story of a 16-year-old girl who shared how she felt, quote unquote, addicted to video games during the pandemic, which now has led to academic struggles, that it has made it harder for her to engage academically now and to rebuild relationships because she got used to not being in person. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times my teenage clients or teenagers I know will say, and then she was all like, well, who do you think you are, with all this attitude? And I'll go, did she tell you it in that way, or did you read it? Well, no, she texted it, or I saw it posted. It's like, how do you know that's how she meant it or he meant it? But she'll add in all these kind of dynamics, projecting it onto the screen. And I mean, I've heard it said before that communication is 7% words, 38% tone of voice, 55% body language. So your daughter is taking 93% of nonverbal communication oftentimes and saying it's very personal. I mean, again, lots of stories I could tell you. One in particular right now pops in my head where, and I'll say this, it could be your daughter. She reads a post that someone else wrote and knows it's about her. She's convinced that was directly stated to her. Just heard a story where then this teenage girl texts that friend, hey, are we okay? I feel like we're not saying that she just read what she posted. And the other girl's like, don't make a big deal of things. It's not all about you. Well, now she's devastated. But do you realize how the whole thing started? Because she was spending extra time, probably in the middle of the night, on screen time. At least that's the way I heard it. But I'm saying for your daughter, it might be the middle of the night, but it doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the day, does it? It's still that she gets caught up into this whole other world about how are you perceiving me? And does the queen bee like me, the one with the most power? And the social deprivation is really reaching, heightened epidemic levels because there's not enough face-to-face time. Another reason to limit your daughter's screen time. Okay, here's another area of harm. And that is attention fragmentation. That's what he calls it, where because of, being, like focused on a screen, it's hard, we all know that, to pull someone away. Hey, listen, look at me when I'm talking. You know that. And it's hard to pull the device away or the remote away. And you've, as a dad, and this is one of the points I want to make at the end today, you got to be willing to let your daughter get mad at you, push back at you, hate your limits. Because if you really care about her life, her brain, you will fight for her safety. I mean, he even tells the story, Dr. Haidt kind of begins his book by talking about what would you do if aliens showed up and said, we want to abduct your daughter. We want to take her or your sons. We're going to take them to Mars just for a few years. We're going to take them away from here and we're going to do experiments on their brains and we'll send them back in a few years. They're like, every parent would say, you've got to be kidding. You're out of your ever-loving mind, right? But he said, that's what's happening is your children's brains are being hijacked. You're losing them for a period of time where you don't know what they're being exposed to in their brains. And then they come back to you. But this is definitely having detrimental impacts on not just self-harm, not just depression, not just anxiety, but even suicidality, where kids, we see the numbers rising of young kids, and I'm mostly talking about teenagers, but it's heartbreaking how many are taking their lives. I mean, even some of our grandkids just a month ago had a teenage boy who they thought was popular, took his life. And so we don't always know what it's tied to, but anything you as a girl dad can do to try to offset the negative impact of phone use, you are taking steps in the right direction. But that leads to the next point that he makes of another foundational area of harm due to having a phone-based childhood is addiction. And so this addiction of being stuck to our phone where we can't get away from what other people think is having detrimental impacts. And so for me, a practice that I've had for many years, and I'm telling you, I even am trying to reboot here in the new year where I take every Saturday, kind of, Friday night to Sunday morning, all Saturday, to not look at anything on social media. I don't look at emails. I don't look at screens as best I can. But what I realize is sometimes I keep my phone for texts. There's been some days that I'll tell the people I love, hey, I'm not even available, via texting, to try to really give my brain a break, to go through withdrawal. Like I want to pick it up. But that kind of addiction, my friend, is where all of us, even as big kids, need to set the example, because if you're not willing to go through the withdrawal, how can you expect your daughter to do the same? Let me read another quote that Dr. Jonathan says about smartphones and devices. He said, the great rewiring of childhood from play-based to phone-based has been a catastrophic failure. Children thrive when they're rooted in real-world communities, not in embodied virtual networks. Well, what does that do? That brings up the question, what can you as a dad do to help turn the tide so that you can have a healthier daughter? Well, here's one of the things, actually 4 things that Dr. Jonathan suggests. 1, no smartphones before high school. Can you believe that? He is living this out with he has 2 teens, one of them a daughter. No smartphones before high school. I don't know if I know any parent that agrees with him, but this is what he's saying. Number 2, no social media before age 16. Dad, you might have to pull back. Talk with mom. Is this something? But talk with your daughter. Because remember, this is the age, especially 12 to 18, where you want to teach your daughter how to think, not just what to think. So this may be an area, Dad, where you, mom, and daughter can sit down, go through the book, get Dr. Jonathan's book. It's a powerful read. The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. Read it together. Highlight parts of it together. Listen to this podcast together so that your daughter becomes educated in what this world over here that isn't a real world, full real world connection. They may say these are real world connections, but they're not face to face. That's where you can make a differentiation. Face to face is what we're talking about. That is what has to be increased in order to see social interactions change, because this generation is forgetting how to do a lot of that, and more communication, as we all know, is happening in writing with devices in their hands. So here's what he says. Again, no smartphones before high school, no social media before age 16. And the next 2 are phone-free schools, which we know some of them, I've only heard of a couple, that actually are not allowing phones anymore in the classroom. Everyone says, oh, what if there's an emergency? Guess what? We dealt with emergencies before without them. We can do it again. And number 4, far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. Okay, so if you are convinced that the very devices that your daughter is holding in her hands are destroying her confidence and negatively impacting her mental health, I would ask you, Dad, what is keeping you from addressing this head on? Are you ready to address this head on? If you are, I want to give you 4 practical action steps. Now, I came up with these along with what Dr. Jonathan has written, kind of made it my own. But the bottom line is less screen time plus more real world time equals less anxiety, less depression, less self-harm, less suicidality, and more confidence and greater self-esteem. And it all comes down to devices and smartphones. I mean, dads, you've got to step in and take action. For those of you moms listening, this is the time parents have got to contend for and fight for the mental health of your children. Honestly, this is going to be too hard to reverse if we don't begin as a culture to do this differently. And he really advocates for parents joining with other parents so that your child isn't the only one, who has all these limits on screen times. But I would tell you, one of our kids, they have 4 kids, 3 teens, 1 preteen. Every night at 10 p.m., they use Disney Plus. And I'm not just trying to highlight that platform, but that's the one he uses. It shuts off everybody's access to anything internet related at 10 p.m. And so if anyone needs it extra long, they have to come to mom or dad to let that one device be accessed. It's awesome. Everyone knows it. They all comply. I know they fought it for a while, but I know they're on board now. So that's one practical action step. Okay, but here it is. I have 4 P's for you. Put down your phone, play together, positive reinforcement, and process with her. And I even have a kind of a 5th one that I'm going to actually add here, which is pray with her. But that's kind of a separate one. Okay, number 1, put down your phone. He talks about, Dr. Jonathan, about doing a digital detox for set periods of time and then insists that your daughter do the same. Start with an hour, go to 2, go to half a day, go to a day. So you don't have to do it all at once, but work up to that. He calls it a digital detox or a digital Sabbath. You'll go through withdrawal, but make sure your kids, even now, if they aren't turning in their phone every night to you in your room, on your, bed, if they sneak it out, put it under the, mattress, because that may be a hard pattern to break, a hard addiction to break, but you've got to put your phone down. It's the only way real life can happen. Set aside time for everybody to check their phones, then have them be off. Let your kids be bored. Research shows more creativity happens when kids are bored. Okay. Number 2, play together. Play together. Again, like you said, we've replaced play-based childhoods with phone-based childhoods. So the only way to have less phone is to have more play. Are you bringing fun into your home? Literally, you can just, put in your search engine fun things to do with a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 36-year-old. Type it in. What are fun things to do? Create ideas. Find other dads. Brainstorm on social media. What are fun things that some of you have done with your kids? Ask other dads and then adapt them to your family. But find ways to do real-time, face-to-face play and then brainstorm together. You guys could all make a list as a family. What would be fun for you? Let your daughter write that out. Number 3, as I said, positive reinforcement. So here's the thing. As your daughter tries some new things, and gives up her phone, she's going to be cranky. Just expect it. So you may want to go, what's up with you? I want to, stop your negativity. Just expect it and refrain from commenting on the negative through the withdrawal while you're trying to increase play and fun and laughter and connection and goal setting and, having a mission and a purpose and serving. No, there's going to be a lot of adjustment here. So find ways to positively reinforce what she is doing right. And then the last one I said, process with her. I kind of included pray with her, but I think that goes together, is make sure during all of this, you're talking with her. Pursue regular conversations where she's telling you what she's learning about herself. And maybe she's writing more, doing art more. Do it with her. Find ways to join her as she's processing, being more aware of how caught up perhaps she has been with what everybody else thinks of her, rather than really what God's wired her to do and what her innate giftings are, and that she's abandoned some of that for this greater social acceptance that she probably won't have. I mean, tell your kids, I'm not even friends probably with everybody from 4th grade or 8th grade or, 11th grade or whatever. But I am with a couple people because guess what kind of friends they were. But all those others, I'm not even friends with them anymore. Tell those stories. That's how you can process with her, because you're being honest about your process. And use that time to pray with her. I mean, let's pray about this together. Let's pray that God would give you a purpose and a passion beyond your phone. I love all the P's, right? Let's give up phone, but you have to have something to replace it with. You can't just say no to one thing without saying yes to another. So here it is in a nutshell. Play more with your daughter. Encourage your daughter to play more with her friends where they don't have phones on. Risk more where she doesn't have to be perfect. There's that P, that perfectionism will destroy her creativity and her desire to try something new where she maybe has a fit afterwards or meltdown. Let her be in all of that, and then join her by praying over her, pray with her, pray for her, so that she would be on her phone less and play more and be more of who God wired her to be. So my final encouragement to you, Dad, is to align with the words. This is what Dr. Jonathan says. Let's bring our children home. Bring your kids home where they know they're going to be encouraged, where limits are set, where they can process and pray. So there's those 4 things. Put your phone down. Play together, positive reinforcement, and process with her and pray with her. So there you have it. I would say in the next 7 days, here's the deal. Invite your daughter then into an activity that's new for her, both of you, or perhaps one you've done in the past. That's one way to do that, all of those together. Find something you can do together, but there's one rule, no phones allowed, unless you want to take a picture on the way or during your time, but turn all notifications off, okay? Find a way, because look at, then you're putting your phone down, you're playing together, you're going to positively reinforce her with what you're seeing her do right and what she's trying that's new, even if she isn't perfect. And then you're going to process with her along the way and afterwards. And then you could pray over her. So you can do all of those things by finding something this next week that you can do together. Even I would say by the end of the day today, even set up a time with her. Even if you don't have time for 2 weeks, get it on the calendar and then go do that with her. Celebrate stepping up with her into new things while putting your phone down. There you go. Practical ways that you can understand as a dad how to influence your daughter in this season of less phone, more play. Well, let's do this together, Dad. As you know, this wraps up another week's program, and I love being here with you all. Thank you for joining me. Share this with your friends, and let's all get on board with pursuing, I would say, passion, purpose, and life where we're making a difference. Well, I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the Dad Whisperer, signing off and encouraging you, Dad, to make today a day where you intentionally and consistently invest in pursuing your daughter's heart. Go Dads.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. If you're looking for more resources to support the father-daughter relationship, or if you want to connect personally with Dr. Michelle, you can find all the information you need at drmichellewatson.com. That's drmichellewatson.com. And remember, you can listen to the Dad Whisperer podcast anytime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again on the next edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.